I've been married for 5 years, and we have a beautiful 5-year-old daughter. Throughout our marriage, life has felt secure and strong, and I had no reason to doubt my wife's loyalty. From the very beginning, I made a commitment to always be faithful to her, even when opportunities for infidelity came my way. I believed in our family and prioritized it above all else, no matter what. Our life together seemed ideal, and I trusted my wife completely. We had a cottage that we used to visit, though due to my work, I couldn't go as often as I'd liked. However, my wife would frequently go there whenever her schedule permitted. I never had any reason to think that anything was amiss during those times, and I trusted her implicitly. There were no signs, no red flags, nothing that would suggest she was seeing anyone else. Our relationship was solid. We communicated about everything, whether it was small decisions like what groceries to buy, or significant choices about our future. Both of us worked full-time, and sometimes we'd meet up after our shifts, but I always made sure to express my love and appreciation for her through small gestures, flowers, gifts, and spontaneous acts of affection. I took pride in making her feel valued. This past New Year, she told me she wanted to spend the holiday at the cottage. I didn't mind at all, but at the last minute, I was sent on a business trip from December 25th to January 4th. I had to leave for 5 days, but the trip was fully compensated, so it wasn't an inconvenience financially. I returned to work on January 5th, and when I told my wife, she seemed disappointed. She explained that if I didn't go, she would simply spend the new year with her girlfriends. It seemed like a harmless plan at the time, so I agreed without thinking twice. I never imagined that this would lead to anything suspicious. The new year came and went, and I thought little of it. Winter passed, then spring, and everything seemed normal. I had no reason to believe anything had changed in our relationship. However, in June, I stumbled upon a truth that would devastate me. It was entirely by accident, as if fate itself decided to reveal the lies she'd been keeping from me. One day, while I was driving through the city, I began feeling thirsty. I slowed down and decided to stop by a convenience store. As I entered the store, I heard someone behind me call out, "Hello, Michael. Is that you, or am I imagining things?" I turned around and saw a familiar face. At first, I couldn't place him. I asked, "Who are you?" He responded, "It's me, your classmate." That's when it clicked. I recognized him, and we embraced as we caught up on life, work, and mutual acquaintances. Eventually, he asked, "So, are you still married?" I responded with a simple, "Of course." He paused for a moment before saying, "Wait, if I remember correctly, you were married to Harper, right?" I confirmed, "Yes, I'm still married to her." Then, in a tone that seemed uncertain, he said, "I don't understand. What was she doing at John's cottage on New Year's Eve? I've actually seen her there a few times, even before New Year's." I stood there, frozen. Confusion hit me like a wave. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to make sense of what he was saying. He explained that he had a cottage just 300 meters away from John's place, and he had seen my wife there several times. He had recognized her from my social media photos, and at first, he thought maybe Harper and I had separated. He didn't want to get involved, assuming it wasn't his business. Hearing this felt like a punch to the stomach. It was almost surreal. I was stunned, unable to process the information. The thought of my wife being involved with another man, especially at the cottage where I had assumed she was alone or with friends, sent a wave of disbelief through me. I didn't know what to think or how to react in that moment. Immediately, I decided to check my wife's messages, hoping to confirm whether there was any truth to what I'd just heard. As I sifted through her texts, the reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no explicit reference to anything sexual, but the details in the messages spoke volumes. They outlined specific dates, times, and locations when I wasn't around, when no one else was at the cottage, and when it was just her and someone else. The messages showed how carefully she had been planning these secret meetups, ensuring that there was no chance of anyone discovering what she had been doing. One particular message stood out. She mentioned she didn't know how to file for a divorce. The thought of her contemplating that broke me. The truth was undeniable. I couldn't avoid it any longer. I confronted her as soon as I could. At first, she lied, claiming she had been at our cottage on New Year's Eve. I asked her, "Whose house were you really at?" Her response was defensive. "Why are you asking these questions? What's wrong with you?" she snapped. I told her everything I knew, including the conversation I had just had with my classmate. Her reaction was unlike anything I expected. She immediately went into a state of shock, her face pale, as if she might collapse. She started crying, and in a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage, she confessed everything. She swore that it would never happen again and begged me not to leave her. She called me a fool, saying I was the one she truly wanted. She promised she would change, that it was a mistake. At that moment, I was torn. I stood at a crossroads, uncertain of whether I should try to forgive her and rebuild what we had, or walk away from the marriage altogether. The decision weighed heavily on me. It felt like whatever path I chose, there would be no going back. For the next month, I was consumed with thoughts of what had happened. I couldn't even think about how this might affect our daughter. All my energy was directed toward deciding what to do about my wife. She was affectionate, telling me she loved me and even talking about having another child. She seemed to be trying to bring things back to normal. But every time I thought about her with someone else, it made me sick to my stomach. The thought of her being physically close to another man, touching her, holding her, it ate away at me. When autumn arrived, I made the decision to stop pretending everything was fine. I needed time to reflect and evaluate my feelings. I had to decide if the love I once felt for her could ever be restored. It wasn't easy. There was a fine line between hope and skepticism. I knew that whatever choice I made would shape the rest of my life. Ultimately, I came to the heartbreaking conclusion that I could no longer love her the way I once did. The betrayal had cut too deep, and I couldn't ignore it. I filed for divorce. It wasn't just a decision about her. It was about me too. I realized that moving forward, I would never be able to trust her again. If she could betray me in this way, what could I expect from anyone else? The decision was final, though it didn't make it any easier to live with. It was only then, in the midst of this turmoil, that I reflected on a seemingly innocent memory. Lisa's 5th birthday party. We had been happily married for 10 years at the time, and our family was the center of our world. To celebrate, we threw a big party at our house, inviting family, friends, and neighbors. We hired an entertainment agency to make the event even more special, bringing in famous cartoon characters and a clown for the kids. Lisa was absolutely overjoyed, and the party was a huge success. I had met the performers earlier in the day to ensure everything was in order, but once the party started, my wife took over the management. We both stayed busy attending to our guests, making sure everything ran smoothly. I didn't have much direct interaction with the entertainers, but I was happy to see the kids enjoying themselves. Weeks passed after the party, and then one day, I had to rush home to gather some important work documents. In my haste, I grabbed the wrong folder. When I realized my mistake at the office, I drove back home to retrieve the correct one. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. My wife's car was parked outside, but she didn't come out to greet me as usual. At first, I thought little of it. Maybe she was busy inside. But when I entered the house, I went straight to the cabinet where I kept the documents. As I was scanning through them, I saw my wife walking down the stairs. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice filled with unease. "I forgot my papers," I replied, trying to stay calm, though I sensed something was off. She stood in front of me, watching me closely, and I noticed she seemed nervous, but I didn't know why. I pushed it aside and kept looking for the folder. Finally, I found what I needed and was ready to leave. As I called out, "See you tonight," and turned to head out the door, I froze. A man's bag was sitting on the couch. My heart dropped. I picked up the bag and stared at my wife, who stood there silently. Suspicion immediately took over, and I walked upstairs to the second floor. What I found when I entered the bedroom wasn't what I expected. At first, I didn't see anyone, but when I opened the closet door, there he was, partially dressed. For a moment, I couldn't react. Then my mind cleared, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was the clown from the party, the one who had entertained at Lisa's birthday. My disbelief was overwhelming. What had I just walked in on? I didn't waste time asking questions. I immediately escorted him out of the house. To my surprise, he didn't resist, and it only fueled my anger even more. But the real fury was reserved for my wife. I had to confront her, and when I did, everything came to light. The truth was undeniable. The pain was unbearable. I had never imagined this kind of betrayal, certainly not in this way, not with someone so close to home. Thanks for watching. Subscribe Beyond the Surface.